would-be cyber attack was a team of U.S. Army cyber warriors who will not be defeated. Find out more at goarmy.com/team.
So I saw that, I was like, wow, yeah, that would be awesome. Something that you can get together on a team and you go after hackers. And so that was one of the inspirations for some of the stuff for me to go through this talk. So hope you guys enjoy it. There's a lot of stuff here, put a little time into it, and stay for the end. A lot of good stuff in here, and I'll let you guys know at the end how to get the slides if you want them. So anyway, who am I? Start down this journey. My name is Ralph Collum. I work for a company in Columbia, South Carolina named Training Concepts. Basically, I started out as a server admin. Went through and did the MCSE track and way back in Server 2000 and Server 2003. And then since then, I've been a consultant and or a trainer or instructor for Training Concepts since then. So that's kind of what I do. I focus mostly on security. I am a co-organizer of OWASP Columbia, a group in town in Columbia that does application security awareness or more security advocacy. We have a meetup coming up in December if you guys are interested. So you can go to OWASP Columbia, find out more. It should be good. Also a member of COLASEC, a local security meetup group in Columbia, South Carolina. So both of those really fun to do. As well as my passion is kind of spreading the word when it comes to information security. Kind of a kid of the 80s, so everything 80s. I am a huge fan of Stranger Things and the new season that they just came out with. So that's kind of a little bit about me, I guess. Where we're going to get started and kind of go through this long journey to get you guys into information security, or even if you're in information security, kind of tailor what you should be doing, maybe some of the things that have enhanced my journey as far as in information security. And then we'll kind of talk about the general state of things as well as we go through this project, so to speak here. So what is computer security in today's world? Well, as Frank, my other co-organizer for OWASP, had said this morning, we're kind of stuck in a mess, and we've been there for a little while, but ideally, a lot of what's referenced in information security originally kind of just to protect our assets, and that's really what the goal should be. But now it's kind of been immortalized by things like our media and or cool shows like Mr. Robot and or everything on from 60 Minutes to everything that's covered today. So a lot of cool things there that kind of give it a lot of press coverage, as well as some of these sites are amazing at kind of giving you an idea, kind of a foothold of where our current climate is from regards to information security. And so we need to kind of raise up a cyber army, so to speak, and that's kind of what prompted me to kind of bring to light this particular talk today. My quote, and of course a lot of people use the Sun Tzu quote a lot in their presentations. My quote's a little bit different. Who controls the information wins the war, and that's really where we're at today in information security, and you see it with a lot of the nation-state actors that are out there, China and all the bears, and as well as Russia and North Korea. So ideally, it's a scary climate to be in, but it's also an exciting time to be in information security as well. So I'd like to kind of go over that a little bit. Now, you don't have to go far to see some of the big issues that are out there. From everything from Equifax to eBay to Target and everybody else. And so here, ideally, it's not a matter of when. We've probably heard this before, but it's just, is it happening right now? Is it happening tomorrow? Eventually, everything will be going down the road to everything needing to be protected today. And so that's kind of what you see a lot in the news. And of course, that's been publicized pretty well this year with things like NotPetya and WannaCry and all the various other types of mess out there. And now, add to the complexity of things, internet-connected stuffed animals and or webcams that or nanny cams and stuff like that are being hacked. So we put a lot on the internet, and IoT and or Network of Things is becoming more and more popular, and so that's kind of the next evolution in security of trying to kind of protect some of these devices. When our fridges start to get ransomware and our TVs, it's a pretty serious business, right? So those are some of the things that are my highlights, at least from the last couple of years, on where information security is in its current climate. as well as if you look at what's the definition for information security. And so ideally, I said in the beginning, for me, information security is about protecting assets, and those assets are digital assets. Those assets are physical and or non-tangible assets in the concept of things like intellectual property. We're losing a lot of that. There's some great books out there like Glass Houses that you can read that kind of talk about how our intellectual property is being mishandled. And so when we say protecting assets, that's any item of value. When we look at that, that's what Infosec is trying to protect those assets. And preventing things like data theft and or identity theft, those types of things are really where we're looking in the future. Even things like securing big data is super important to information security. All right, so why Infosec, right? Ultimately, why pick this as a role? I get that question a lot, being a trainer and or instructor at the place I work, and see lots of students come through and ask, well, why should I focus on information security? Well, it's very popular today to say that these are some of the reasons. One is the biggest discussion point for a lot of people is that, well, ideally, information security is a place that has a very high demand, however, is very much craftsman oriented, which means basically you can't know everything in information security. If you think you do, then you're probably in the wrong spot. So ideally, the cool thing about it is like when they come to me and say, I want to be in information security, that's like saying you want to be a doctor. You have to choose a specialty towards something that you're interested in. Are you interested in reverse engineering? Are you interested in pen testing? Are you interested in security analysis? Or whatever the case may be, there's many, many different roles in information security today. And or, as you probably have seen through several different news articles on the internet, a very short supply. To beat a hacker, you got to think like one. So oftentimes when I do classes on ethical hacking or whatever you want to call it, a lot of it becomes that. What can we learn from an attacker? We can learn their methodologies, that we can learn their tactics, we can learn and get an understanding of what they're after. Now you could say that the defense is where a lot of your money is made, and that's absolutely true, but you'll find a lot of red teamers out there as well. So it's both of those. We want to think like a hacker or an attacker. We want to learn from how they attack so that we can better our systems and better our networks. So offense informs the defense. You'll oftentimes hear that as well. We also sometimes see a heavy placement on things like compliance today. GDPR is being implemented right now and will be in effect next year. And there's a big fine, stiff fine and penalty for organizations that are doing business with European nations that aren't up to par in compliance. And so that will be a big initiative for companies next year, you'll see, is making sure that they're in GDPR compliant, privacy compliant. So maybe it's compliance and wanting to just be compliant today. So those are among many other reasons to want to be in information security today. Other than it's a lot of fun. If you're a tinkerer or if you're a person that likes to take stuff apart, break it, build it, that's definitely the place to be. If you're just inquisitive about different things, information security is definitely for you. All right, so what's the current threat landscape? The threat actors, a lot of these we talk about in some of the classes I teach. We talk about the gray hats, we talk about the black hats, the white hats, state-sponsored espionage. We talk about your anonymous or your hacktivist crowd. So looking at the current threat landscape as far as what is out there, there's a lot of different types of attacks that we're going under. And then usually it kind of falls into three camps. Is it that the cybercrime is an organized state agency that has a lot of backing, it has a lot of resources that they can put behind themselves to go after an organization that's maybe U.S. based to get more intel about U.S. relations or U.S. Military intelligence? Or is it somebody as simple as someone that wants to basically go after an organization for some of the thoughts and views and their political side or the religious side of things? So we've got those as well as in our hacktivists. And then, of course, we're starting to see an increase in people that are trying to do espionage and people that are trying to do internal attacks as well. So the threat itself can be internal, it can be external, and it also can be somewhere on these hats that are described commonly with threat actors today. The threat motives that we see, in most cases, what would be the biggest threat motive? What do you guys think? Why do bad guys do what they do? Money. A lot of times it's that, right? It could be some other things. It could be for fame and notoriety. It could be some kind of revenge plot. right? I've seen several of those in the past. It could be blackmail. Ransomware has hit a tipping point and will continue to go further and further and advance things, like I was saying earlier, into your fridge, into your TV. And so that's a nonstop market for a lot of organized crime syndicates, as well as maybe the desire for power as another option here. We see a lot of that in smaller nations, maybe like North Korea, that are trying to get more one-up upon the U.S. And so a lot of motives behind attackers today and why they do what they do. Now, as you talked or had a talk in the beginning this morning, Frank was talking about the deperimeterization of security today. So exactly what does that mean? Well, the current threat climate is growing. It's no longer that we can set things up at the front in the fence and make sure that everything is good at the edge, so to speak. So we've got cloud, we've got IoT, we've got mobilization, and everybody bringing their cell phones and their tablets into the organization. And that's changing the actual landscape for security. Look at the cloud, right, as a good example as well. So our ability to outsource to the cloud. Now, a lot of people, and I'm one of those too, there's many, many benefits to using cloud services today or managed services. One of the biggest things that sticks out in most people's minds, though, is the loss of control of that data, and then how thinly that the cloud provider themselves have to spread themselves. They're thin with handing out other resources to other potential service providers and things that they can't provide themselves. So maybe in this case, our ability to control a chain of distribution is becoming harder and harder today. So a lot of that is where the current threats are, and old threats are new, like Jack was mentioning in the earlier presentation. DDE, a very popular thing back in the early 90s or maybe even mid 90s, now becoming something else that we have to deal with right now. So DDE injection attacks inside of Office is the new rage. And so we start to see things that were old become new again, and so that's kind of interesting, as well as the botnets that are taking off, of course, with things like Mirai botnets. One of my favorite botnets, of course, is the what was it called? The Ghost bot botnet was the one that basically went around and basically started stealing balances off of your gift cards and stuff like that. So you start to see those types of attacks becoming more and more popular and more in the media today. Now, when you look at threats and how they think and how they act, these are kind of some of the different categories. I just picked a couple of the things I like to do when I'm going over and trying to evaluate an organization today. So one of the big ones is reconnaissance. Oftentimes, we skip this phase a little bit much because of the time constraints, maybe possibly, but you shouldn't, because there's a lot of information that can be had today with OSINT and the ability to evaluate an organization and how you can map relationships between employees within an organization. Some of my favorite tools will, of course, talk about some of that in a minute. But where you see a lot of this being a problem is in things like hard-coded credentials, hard-coded API keys, or things that are pushed out on the internet that should have been sanitized before they are out there on the internet. And so, in general, that's another large cause for concern today for business. Of course, the malicious software will never get any easier. It's just going to be something that continues to grow and grow and grow. And so with things that are now starting to put together a series of events that take place to hack an organization, chaining or malware or chaining malicious code together is a very popular type of attack technique that a lot of organizations are looking at. So malicious software and ransomware will continue to grow. We'll not get rid of denial of service. I mean, again, it's protocol manipulation. So unless you're going to get rid of the protocols or build new protocols that don't have some of those same things, that's going to be a big cause for concern. And of course, as it goes to the mobile marketplace and our cloud, as we continue to stretch ourselves thin, we'll continue to have that more and more to be a concern. And then, of course, we can't get rid of users, right? So they're also one of our big threat targets. So we look at threat modeling. Now, I'm not the person to be an expert in threat modeling, but it just makes sense to me. If you would want to understand better your organization and what some of the insecurities your organization are, you might want to come up with a way a bad guy would attack those assets in that environment. And that's kind of, in essence, what threat modeling offers us. So if you implement threat modeling in an organization today, it'll give you faster detection. It'll make you more self-aware of what's around you and in your environment. It'll help to reduce the overall effect that if an attacker does compromise an organization, what effect that has on the overall organization itself. And there are lots of different types of methodologies that you can follow. Lockheed Martin, of course, the one that a lot of people throw out there for threat modeling in the use of the kill chain. But then there's also the use of things like threat intelligence feeds, which some people call it snake oil or something else there. But you should definitely look at and evaluate threat intelligence and threat modeling in your environment to make sure that you're covering your basics. So risk management, we can't also not look at this. So ideally, a lot of times when we look at risk in the organization, it's all a measuring stick. So as Frank mentioned this morning, we talked about metrics, and that's really the prime principle behind what can we do to lower the threat. If you're going to lower the threat, you've got to understand your vulnerabilities in your environment. You've got to be able to map the threat to the vulnerabilities in the environment. You've got to understand better your risk. So, and those risks themselves, they're not something that we can put in a package, put a dollar number on. It's more than that. We have to understand what's the ideal threat. So I could say you have a huge vulnerability in your environment, but what's the likelihood? And then, of course, look at the impact as another part of that. And so when you're looking at risk management in general, it's not just buying insurance. It's not being able to say, oh, we'll just deal with that later. It has to be a methodology that you're applying in your environment to make sure you're dealing with risk in an appropriate manner. All right. So then what do you got? So you've got several frameworks to follow. One of the things that I'm a believer in is methodologies. Now, I don't say you can't run off of 100% one of these methodologies that are out there, but there is some great resources out there that you can go in and grab. So you can look at, for example, with regards to risk, you can look at some of the NIST 800 series. There's a lot of good stuff in there. Some of it's out of date, obviously, but you can look to apply some type of methodology and make it work for your business. And that's definitely a road to go. We looked at the CIS controls earlier. I mean, there's the NIST 853, which deals with security controls for your environment. So that's definitely something to look at, as well as there's a lot of cool things in the NIST standards that you can evaluate for your business and see if there's anything that can stick. Now, as we move the corner here, kind of look at some of the stuff that I personally like. A lot of times it comes to the discussion of, is it that I want to be a red teamer, or do I want to be a blue teamer, or somewhere in the middle, maybe purple team or something like that. For me, it started out as a red teamer. I wanted to be nothing but being able to break stuff and bang on stuff. But now as I get a little older and I start wanting to understand things more, I'm in the middle, right? So I like to be able to understand both the red side and the blue side. You don't have to pick a side in most cases unless that's your design job. And even if it is your design job, you can still learn from both sides of the puzzle. And so I think it's an extremely important thing to not have these things that Daniel was talking about this morning, and the use of things like silos, or maybe it was Frank, I can't remember. That's an extremely important and valuable solution for us in information security today, is start breaking down some of those silos. So what is ethical hacking or hacking? A lot of people put that term out there. A lot of times the term hacking itself gets people think of it as a very derogatory term. It doesn't have to be, and ethical doesn't have to be the word you use with it. And in general, hacking is being able to take something apart to the point that you understand what is doing, and understand more product of what you can do to manipulate it and modify it. And so if you haven't, and if you're starting in information security, I tell a lot of people, start from a background of understanding some of these protocols. So look at RFC 793, look at RFC 791, look at some of these protocols that define TCP and UDP and ICMP. Because that's really, when you look at hacking, that's what we're doing. We're taking those protocols that are already ingrained and very well used today, and we're manipulating them. So that's really what hacking is. It's the ability to kind of take something that's already in existence and modify it, right? Now, when you look at the types of attacks that are out there today, I just picked some of the very fine few that are out there. Denial of service, distributed denial of service. And so, again, it could be protocol manipulation. Maybe we're looking at the app server and doing some type of slow LoRa's variant type of service or whatever. Or maybe we're doing some type of brute force where we're doing like user-side denial of service. We've got lots of different types of denial of service attacks that are out there. A lot of attacks today in regards to being able to implement social engineering. will do spoofing or masquerading as an attack. Another type of attack very popular today is man-in-the-middle. So in order to do a man-in-the-middle attack, the first step of it is ARP spoofing. So we go through the process here of manipulation in each one of these. And then we've got great tools like from Black Hills Information Security, the Mail Sniper, right? Being able to do, password guessing basically is what it's doing. So you can feed it a password list and a bunch of users, or a password and a bunch of users, and you can go through and, access Outlook or Exchange or whatever it is. So lots of cool attacks, and that's one cool thing you'll see in information security. You never get tired of researching or looking at the various different attacks that are out there. So we look at the attacks, we learn about the attacks, we learn about how the attacks are being implemented, and then we start looking for controls. What kind of controls can we put in that resource environment to mitigate some of these types of techniques? All right, so I picked another particular type of attack that's very useful today, social engineering. Social engineering works 100% of the time, most of the time. So ideally, this particular attack is just human manipulation. So you're going in to a targeted environment, you're looking at some of their social media, maybe LinkedIn, because we don't put anything fake on LinkedIn, and then you're trying to manipulate that person into doing something that they're not understanding how sensitive that is. And it might be disclosing a password to just giving off a handful of attributes about the company that help that social engineer to be able to access that company a lot easier today. Some of the tactics we like to use, at least that I've done in the past, very popular to use some of these. So you'll go in and you'll send an email and it'll have something like, well here I'll show you some of the phishing stuff I was going to show you in a second. It'll have something like this, where it'll say, in order to access this particular document, you've got to enable content, right? Or, I sure need to read this document, this presentation, or whatever it is, because it was sent to me by this person that I trust within the organization, or at least it looks like someone I trust. So I click a link, and then by clicking that link, it gives me access to that particular user in that environment. And that's all an attacker's looking for, is a pivot point. So you get the first beachhead into the environment, and then from that beachhead, you start to pivot and pillage all throughout the organization using a variety of different types of tools. And so, maybe simple as something, sending a phishing email, right, could be a good example of social engineering today. Of course, as we talked about, ransomware is on the rise. It becomes more and more of a huge problem for a lot of organizations today. And there's really not a lot to get to the point of fixing it. Now, Windows 10 does have protected containers, which is a new feature that they enabled in the Creators Update that they just released here. So that's something in the right direction. And some of the other options that they're doing, even though they're terrible with privacy, are in the right direction with micro-virtualization and microkernel virtualization that they're doing in Windows. But we're also still getting the simple stuff, right? Like I said, just getting something, you click on it, and then boom. Compromise that organization through that click link. So attacking ICS is another big problem for us today. So as we start to look at things like Black Energy, I'll let you guys read that for a second. So Black Energy from the Ukraine and some of the issues that they've been having here recently, it kind of all fathered around the Stuxnet worm. And it's getting worse and worse. And so we're at the point now of critical infrastructure and or IoT that we're starting to see more and more attacks using that particular platform of choice. So until we understand better how to protect around these systems and add controls around these systems for things like patching, that's going to continue to be a big problem for us. And so, and 0 days are there too. So you look at Stuxnet as a classic example of using multiple 0 days to compromise organizations. All right. So what are some of the other issues that a lot of organizations have? So big one's policy weakness. So you'll go into an organization, I'll just give you an example here. If I'm on an engagement, I'll go in there and I'll ask them, you want us to look at and review your policies for any things that are, that stand out, that are things that you should be looking at and implementing that you're not. So it all starts here, right? Person is not implementing a acceptable use policy with email. And then they wonder why their employees are signing up for Dick's Sporting Goods with their company email. And they're wondering why they have a massive problem with spam and other things. And so the issue here that I see a lot today is there's no policy around something, nothing that governs resource access, nothing that enforces what are the consequences if you violate policies today. And so you'll even see, the change management and some of the turnover be a part of this as well. So people leave organizations and they still have access to email 6 months later down the line. And so that's a big disconnect for a lot of organizations today, is making sure that they apply a policy that is enforceable and understandable throughout the organization. Access controls are being a problem too. So we'll implement some fancy system, but until it's after its provisioning phase, whatever you want to call it, it's disabled, even though we've spent a lot of money. And of course, one day the service technician will come in and he'll turn it on and we'll get trained on it. And then that's another year later that, after we've had this device that was supposed to be helping us in the first place with security. So those types of things are real world scenarios that are out there for sure enough. And then things like not proper plan segmentation. So one thing that'll happen a lot, it's a really cool attack, curb roasting. So you'll have an organization that creates a service account and it's managing SQL, managing SharePoint, or whatever it is, and they're using one standard password that's got domain access in the environment, and then you go off and curb roast that environment. And the problem here is now you have no segmentation. You're using crappy passwords, and so it's easy to crack those passwords. And now I've got access as a system or access as a service account that has higher privilege in the organization. So there needs to be more policies. I know that's something probably nobody wants to hear, that are not only concise, not only understandable, but also enforceable in organizations today. And then also other stuff too. So you can see here, non-existent incident response plan or non-existent disaster recovery plan. What's the number one way, you probably think in your head, to fight this thing called ransomware? Well, maybe have a good backup or have a strategy for disaster if something happens. I'm just thinking out of the box, you know. So we still have human error, and there's no way to get around this. It's a huge step, right, for an organization to change the behavior of the employees for the organization becomes a huge hurdle for any organization that has to look at this. So we have to get management on board, like they were talking about here earlier, upper level management, and having incentives as another big process to this. And maybe it's not that we have security awareness training once a year. Maybe it's an ongoing effort that continually tries to make adjustments and tries to make incentives and changes to the organizational employees to move the needle a little bit in that direction. And we have to have metrics. We have to have ways to measure the effectiveness of it. So what do? Well, you assess, right? So you've gone through all this security awareness training. How do you know it's working? You assess, right, some of those to see if that actually is working. Are you changing the attitudes? Are you changing the behavior of the employees? And then the configuration weaknesses. This one's aggravating a little bit. So obviously I understand every service that we use has configuration. Every technology that we use has some kind of said defaults. I understand it. But the problem here becomes more and more you see that those defaults are getting us into trouble. So here we might not have applied a patch that turned off something that we should have turned on, or turned off, excuse me. Or maybe it's something that is being turned off that actually helps us, right? And adds a layer of separation between maybe standardly run processes and elevated run processes. And so those types of things are huge. And what you see is a lot of this, right? So we move things to the cloud, and yeah, there's tools out there on the cloud, but we move the same crap from on-prem to off-prem, and in this case, we'll call it today. We just expect that it'll be more secure because hopefully that vendor has their stuff up to date and their stuff, in this case, locked down, which is not always the case. So you're still seeing lots of verbose error messages, lots of defaults, lots of issues within organizations today. And it all boils down to defense in depth. Now, I understand, as we said, the perimeter is changing, but that doesn't mean you still can't have this methodology of defense in depth. So take those CIS top critical 20 controls that we can apply in an organization. Start with number one. Right? Number one's pretty simple, right? Maybe not, I don't know. Know what you got, right? You can't protect what you don't know you got, right? So you've got to go through and evaluate what's out there in your environment and then focus on authentication. Are we doing multi-factor authentication? Are we doing things or everything that we can to evaluate the privilege for resources and users in the environment? So is there a standard group audit, right? Or user behavior monitoring in the environment? These are all great things that you can apply. Takes a lot of work, but these are the things that we have to do to get better as an industry. And of course, I like this part. This is my part. So penetration testing. One of the things about pen testing that's kind of unique and kind of interesting all the same is it never gets old. There's always new ways to manipulate different types of protocols, right? Or always neat tools that you can learn about or build yourself your own tools. And so why do a pen test? Well, one, it prevents, or it kind of reduces, hopefully, the chances of a breach having a very, very large impact in an organization. So it does help a little bit there. But think about it like this. A pen test, if you're given a week, if you're given 2 weeks, it's a very small format. So you're only going to get a little taste of what the resource really is in that environment. And so it's not a replacement for full system security in your environment. It should be the last series of controls you have. Sometimes you'll do it to meet compliance. So that's also another very big reason that a lot of organizations get pen tests, at least on a yearly basis. It should be a part of your standard software development lifecycle. So as a part of that, you should be looking at the threats that adds as you add new features into your software systems. And again, the cool thing about this is it is not an exact science. So you can feel free to reach out and go outside of the box, so to speak. And so when we look at methodologies in information security, we should think of it like a framework, right? Or a skeleton. We add all these cool parts on that make it much, much better. And so when you look at hacking, yeah, it's recon, yeah, it's scanning, yeah, it's exploitation, post-exploitation, and then writing the report. But it's much more than that. That really is just the skeleton of what kind of comes all around it. And so, when I look at pen testing today and hacker methodology, these are some of the types of tools I like. So it might be hard to see from that list, but of course, RECON NG, probably one of my favorite, and as well as Spiderfoot at RECON tools. Now you can use a ton more, right? Shodan is a great place to go. Josh mentioned the OSINT framework earlier. That's another really great place to go. Mike Brazel's website and some of the tools he has to offer, great place to go to learn about OSINT, right? And being able to do effective recon. In addition to that, after you get through your recon, you find email addresses, you find phone numbers, you find all that good stuff that can be used to link and attribute relationships of employees within the organization. Then you get to scanning. So scanning is kind of fun. You can use various tools for scanning. You can use Nmap, you can use Unicorn Scan, you can use HPing, you can use any kind of packet crafter you want. You can use Scapy. So these various tools help you to poke and prod and as well as some enumeration of your service domain. So understanding better what version of this or that they're using within the environment. And then it comes to exploitation. So the cool thing is go to ExploitDB, look around, right? After you've discovered what's there, you might find an exploit on ExploitDB that you can craft to be your exploit that you use to go after an organization. Now you can use a ton of other tools as well. You can use Cobalt Strike, you can use a Metasploit, you can use a variety of different other tools for exploitation. The idea there is we want to take advantage of the vulnerability, we want to plant a payload in the resource environment, and then we want to utilize that as we go through and pivot and pillage. So just a taste of that. These are some great sites. I did a talk last year here of hiding from the internet. It was a real good experience. If you ever get a chance, go to Justin Carroll's website. He has a 30-day security checkup. It's a kind of a challenge that he has there that kind of walks through how can you be less internet visible. And so it's kind of neat to do stuff like that. And there are lots of good resources out there. But going through this list here, Spokio or PIPL or some other ones that are listed here, what am I going to find? Well, I'm going to find out a lot of information about employees within the organization, what's their job role. I'm going to find out things like their email address. I'm going to find out relatives. And what happens a lot of times is you connect the dots with a lot of this information. You can use something like DNS Map for finding some other information through reconnaissance. There's lots of domain crawlers out there like DNS Dumpster that are really good at mapping out an organization. And some of the things like subdomains and trying to link some of those. And then going through simple stuff. So some of this is what I like to do is Google hacking, right? It's amazing. Go to the Google hacking database literally twice a week at least, and kind of look at some of the different new ones that are listed and published out there. So this one right here basically goes through and looks for SharePoint sites within organizations. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I hate SharePoint. It's a great target, I'll say that much. But a lot of organizations put a lot of money and time and effort into using SharePoint today. There's a lot of open stuff out there by using SharePoint. So I target that one a lot. LinkedIn, trying to search for employees within organizations. A lot of the stuff that you put on LinkedIn is real stuff. So that's why I like LinkedIn so much, because you're not going to fake stuff there as much. And then you can always build your own self, a social profile that's less connected to you. You can use things like the Sudo app It'll give you a phone number that's anonymized. It'll give you an email address that you can use and some of those things. You could use something, I don't know, well, there's lots of options there. Privacy.com might be a good place to go. And then OSINT, some of the information there I get a lot of times is going to sites like inteltechniques.com and looking at some of the links they have. All right, so here is the grand finale. We finally reached the climax, so to speak. So how do I get into Infosec, right? Ultimately, all the other stuff was just talking about all the cool things you get to do in Infosec, right? So what makes Infosec so cool, like I said, you don't think of it as a job, right? So any type of job you have, you're like, gosh, I really have to go to work today, right? Or you think of it as a job, oh gosh, I got off work, then that's really not something you want to be in. Infosec will burn you out in those cases. So you want to be definitely passionate. You want to be excited about the career. And one of the cool things about Infosec, like I said, is it never gets old. There's always something new around the corner that you can poke at and prod at. New tools, new techniques, all these fun things. Information security. Someone said this in their talk a couple at DerbyCon this year that I thought was extremely useful. Information security is thought of as a journey, not a destination. So you'll ultimately, like I said, you'll say, I want to be in Infosec, but that's like saying I want to be a doctor. You can't be that all-in-one person. You have to kind of focus on something you're interested in, really, and dig deep. One of the most important things you can see, and like I already mentioned, you can go to those RFC 791, 793, some of those ones that are the core networking protocols that are out there today, dig into those. Because what you're going to do as an attacker, you're going to start manipulating some of those different protocols that are out there. I don't have any, usually show up, usually drink a lot of Rockstar, not a lot, but once a day at least. So you've got to have a lot of caffeine. So that's one of the cool things in information security that keeps you going, kind of the lifeblood of information security today. You also have to be technically adept. And so one of the cool things, I wasn't really always a Windows person. I started kind of doing Windows Server and server administration, and then I kind of moved into the security side. So anybody that is interested in security, it's hard to say that you can kind of just start out, and maybe you can, just going into information security. Understanding protocols, understanding how the network works, troubleshooting, system administration, those types of things really build on top of each other when you get into information security today. And you have to love to tinker. That's one of the important things about information security today. So these are some of the skills. What questions I would ask, right? I would say, what moves you, right? What are you passionate about? What wows you? Those are the things that, you get to explore as an information security professional. You read a lot, right? I'm always constantly looking at new blogs, or I'm constantly looking for on Amazon Books to find new books that I'm interested in. And I want to learn about everything as much as I can get my hands on. So you'll read a lot. Watch a lot. So Iron Geek makes a lot of his videos available from all these conferences. His website will be your best friend, as well as YouTube, right? There's a lot of good BSides on YouTube. There's a lot of good conferences on YouTube. Even if you're a Microsoft person and you're trying to get into Microsoft, a lot of their Ignite stuff they put on YouTube. So there's lots of stuff there that you can watch and then participate. So practice a lot. Come to these events, go to CTFs, try to find a local meetup, those types of things. And then once you get to that point, you start teaching a lot and trying to be kind of presenting this information out there for everybody to consume. Trying to become a mentor. Those are also very key things to, pushing this Infosec or information security forward. Love to solve puzzles, right? Persistent, passionate. Those are all key words that a lot of people in Infosec say you need as to be successful in information security. Podcast, right? So I'm a podcast junkie, right? I'll be honest with you guys. There's lots of good ones out there. There's some in my notes I didn't even mention to you guys. Chris Sanders' Source Code Podcast. Of course, I already mentioned Iron Geek's YouTube channel. The Complete Privacy and Security Podcast from Mike Brazel is another really good one if you're more privacy prone or you want to learn more about OSINT. So maybe you've got that long commute in the morning or in the afternoon. You could use something like that as a place to kind of learn something or catch up with things. Or if you're cutting the grass or whatever the case may be, cleaning the house, those are types of things that you can use these podcasts for to fill the gap, right? So I think podcasting really helps a lot, especially, I like to get reading and or listening and or participating. Do your research, right? Like I already mentioned the RFCs, right? You can go to a whole bunch of other sites out there on the internet and find out information about particular vulnerabilities. Here recently, I was just doing some research on Eternal Blue and Eternal Romance and some of the vulnerabilities that came out this year. So learning more about how those particular vulnerabilities are growth and building your own exploits, right, after that point. And so I would definitely say that in information security, you'll find yourself researching a lot of things. So using some of that, maybe using some of these, like the Verizon data breach report, as a good litmus test to find out, what is the current market of where's everybody being attacked from. So some of that is definitely a part of it. Being able to look at blogs, like literally at least once or twice a week, I'm opening up 50 or more tabs in Firefox or Chrome, and just reading through all the various different types of security articles and blogs that are out there. There are a ton of really good ones out there. Information security, Infosec Handlers, a daily blog. So you can go to that one. That's another one I didn't put in the list, but it's in my notes. A lot of the subreddits, I love those, man. They have good hacking ones. They've got good anti-forensics ones, computer forensics ones. There's lots of good subreddits out there. But find some easy to digest type of tool that you can go through these different blogs and learn information through different security blogs. I already mentioned security books. There's so many of these. I'd say buy a Kindle because I used to have a bookcase full, but it just got too full. So what's the next step, right? Just kind of getting it in more of a digital format. Paperwhite is the one I like to use, but you can find another one. Palo Alto Networks has their Cyber Canon. Definitely go check that out. It basically is a list of cool books to read. And they even kind of do a little award ceremony of some of the different books that are out there. So find some good books. There are tons of ones out there. Or write your own book, right? It's easy to self-publish today. Training. So you can go to training at conferences. You can come to local group meetup training. At Colasec, I did a class on Wireshark. So one-day class on Wireshark or whatever it is. So go to the meetups. Find out if there's anything offered there. Maybe go to paid training. So there is some of that. I know at the place I work at, we do lunch and learns. Now, they're not recorded online or anything like that, but that'd be something that you could use as another option. And this week, actually, I'm doing one on building an incident response program. So those types of things, go to those free learning events. Find free learning online. So there's lots of options there. Go to check out webinars. I know Black Hills Information Security does some. Find the meetups. Look at the certifications. Now, I don't want to say certifications is everything, even though I do teach certifications on some of the guys. But it's a great opportunity to disclose lots of information and be able to kind of get a litmus test on how well you think you're doing as far as some of the information that's out there. And there's lots of options online as well. Cyber IT, another really good resource there for online free training. Of course, you could go the route of certifications. Like I said in the beginning, I don't really use certifications as a crutch. I like to use certifications now as a way to understand how to better help my students that go through some of my certification classes. And so that's really the only use of certifications to me today. But it demonstrates a working knowledge of your information that you have. That's probably the most important part of it. It could be a career differentiator for you, and that's a reason that a lot of people go to certification classes. They're going to try to get a job somewhere. Certifications are a must for some of that stuff. Establish best practices, et cetera, et cetera. Go to conferences. Well, if you can't go to a conference, we have BSides Charleston. We have BSides now. It'll be Greenville coming out in December. We have BSides Augusta, BSides Charlotte, BSides Asheville. So there's lots of BSides around, but then there's also conferences that are held that are larger conferences as well. So go to some of those different conferences that are out there. CarolinaCon in Raleigh is a really good conference. So those types of conferences, try to get out and meet new people and networking and stuff like that. Another big part of it, I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you guys, you got to build a lab. So every student that comes to my class, I ask them what their lab looks like. It's great as an interview question. If you're interviewing someone, you should ask them plainly, what is your home lab look like, right? Because you're trying to understand how passionate are they about learning things and applying new things in their information security career. So I definitely think it's huge. There's lots of good resources there. You can participate, even if you can't afford right now a lab, you can participate on online CTFs. Some of the good ones, Ring Zero, I find myself every Saturday night going, kind of looking at Ring Zero and working on some of the challenges there. So there's some really good resources out there. Go to a meetup CTF. We did one at Colasec and those types of things. You learn a lot of things through those resources. It's easy to get images. A lot of people don't know, I don't know why, but Microsoft developers have a site called Modern IE. You can download Windows 7, Windows 8, and I think Windows 10, and basically they're VMs. So if you're trying to get a Windows VM, download it, and you can pick VirtualBox or VMware. VirtualBox is free, and you can have that for a certain period of time. Now you can use it for testing, And then, of course, move on from there. But there's also lots of great Linux distros out there. So one of my favorite sites is VulnHub, right? I go there at least once a week and kind of see what some of the new vulnerability images are out there that I can download and bang on, excuse me. So that's a really good one. Of course, OWASP has a lot of broken web app projects. We just did here a class on RECON Search and Destroy for OWASP Columbia in August. And we were using one of the OWASP vulnerable web apps. So lots of good resources out there. And of course, even with the use of things like Kali Linux, it makes it a lot easier. There are other solutions out there for hacking distros, though. Try BlackArch Linux is another option. It's got even more tools than Kali Linux does. Or Parrot Pen Test or some of those other solutions out there. Again, Kali's kind of the gold standard, so to speak, but there are other options out there you play around with. And then lastly here, kind of learn to code. So notice I didn't put this first. I'm kind of biased towards things like PowerShell and Python, and I didn't want to feel like, putting this up front, especially if you're getting new into information security, you got to learn right away coding. I definitely think it's a part of your path on being a better information security professional, but it's not the first thing you have to do is learn how to code. So the two primary languages you probably want to focus on are Python and PowerShell. Every PowerShell class I teach, I tell everybody, go to the PowerShell Survival Guide. Just Google it. It's a bunch of good resources that are put up there from Microsoft that provide you videos and tutorials and a lot of things if you're trying to learn PowerShell and get up and going with PowerShell. And then, of course, learn Python the hard way or some other different resources out there to learning Python and helping you on that Python journey as well. All right. That's it, guys. Appreciate your time. Any questions? I think I did pretty good there. Questions, please.
Where did you say that the slides would be?
I will tweet them out, I guess. I don't know how they do slide management here. But I'll probably tweet it out. Or here, there you go. How about that one? You can email me right there, and if you want it, I will send it to you guys. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it, guys. If there's some more questions or you want to stick around and chit-chat, please feel free. I teach in Columbia, South Carolina, in a place called Training Concepts. We do a wide variety of different types of training.
Those are only for college students, not high school.
Not for high school, yeah.
Do you ever do any training for high school students?
No, I haven't done any.
My students are here.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, I'm up for anything. There's nothing, I can't do it through Training Concepts, but I'll do anything outside of Training Concepts. Sure. All right, thanks, guys.